The IV line in my left arm had been there for 11 hours, and I was still counting ceiling tiles when my parents walked in. Not knocked. Walked in. Like it was their house. Like I hadn't spent the last 2 years building a life specifically designed to keep them out of it. I had just come out of surgery 40 minutes earlier. A ruptured appendix. The kind that doesn't give you a lot of warning. The kind where 1 minute you're at your kitchen table drinking coffee, and the next you're on the floor, and your husband is calling 911 while you're trying to tell him you're fine, you're probably fine. I was not fine. They took me in for emergency surgery at 6:42 in the morning, and I woke up in the recovery room at 9:15 with a drain in my side and a nurse named someone I'll never forget telling me everything went well. My husband Garrett was a hospitalist at that same hospital. Had been for 4 years. He knew every floor, every attending, half the nursing staff by first name. When I came out of anesthesia, he was holding my hand and his eyes were red in a way I'd never seen before, and he just said, "You scared me." That was it. That was all he said. He had to get back to rounds. He didn't want to leave, but I told him to go. I was stable, I was fine, the pain was manageable, and I had my phone and I was honestly just looking forward to sleeping for a few hours in peace. That was the plan. My parents had a different plan. My mother came in first, which is always how it works with them. She enters a room before my father so that by the time he arrives you've already been softened up. She was wearing her good coat, the camel-colored one she saves for occasions she wants to signal importance. She set her purse down on the chair beside my bed like she owned it, and she looked at me with that specific expression she has, the one that looks like concern but is actually an assessment. "You look terrible," she said. "I just had surgery," I said. My father came a luxury and old him a luxury a me and old him haters. He closed the door. I want to back up for a second because this doesn't make sense without the context. My parents are not bad people in the way people imagine bad parents to be. There's no screaming, no obvious cruelty. What they are is controlling in a way that took me until my late 20s to even name. My mother managed every part of my life from the time I was small. My clothes, my friends, my extracurriculars, eventually my college choice, my career direction, who I spent time with, and who I didn't. My father bought him a luxury apartment in New York. And I graduated, but just as committed. Their love came in the form of decisions made on my behalf, and if I objected, the response was always a version of the same thing. "We know what's best for you. You don't see it yet, but you will." When I was 26, I met Garrett at a friend's birthday dinner. He was funny and calm, and he listened when I talked. We dated for 8 months before I told my parents, because I knew what was coming. What was coming was he wasn't right for me. His family wasn't the right background. He wasn't the kind of stability they had in mind. My father used the phrase, "not what we envisioned," and my mother cried, which she does when she wants to end a conversation without technically losing it. I sat there in their living room and I thought about every time I had adjusted myself to fit inside the life they'd designed for me, and something just stopped. I kept seeing Garrett. They didn't come to our wedding. My mother sent a card with a check in it that I tore up. My father called the night before the ceremony and told me I was making a mistake, and that when I figured that out, they would be there. I hung up and I went to bed. And the next morning I married my husband in front of 40 of the people we loved most, and it was one of the best days of my life. For 2 years, we had almost no contact. A few texts around holidays. One phone call that devolved quickly into my mother asking pointed questions about our finances and me ending it. I had started seeing a therapist who helped me understand what I'd grown up inside of. I was doing the work, I was getting somewhere. Then I'm lying in a hospital bed with a surgical drain, and my parents are in my room, and my father has closed the door. "We heard what happened," my mother said. "Your aunt called us." My aunt. Of course. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm recovering." "You didn't need to come." "Of course we needed to come," my father said. He sat down in the second chair, the one near the window, and he crossed his legs like he was settling in for a long conversation. "You're alone." "I'm not alone. Garrett is here. Garrett is working. my mother said. You're lying in a hospital bed by yourself, and you're in pain, and you needed family. There was something in her voice that I recognized. A particular frequency that meant the conversation had already been scripted somewhere, and I was just catching up to it. I'd learned to hear it. I heard it then. I appreciate you coming, I said, which was a lie, but I'm really tired and I need to rest. Neither of them moved. My father reached into his jacket pocket and took out a folded piece of paper and set it on the edge of my bed. I looked at it. I didn't touch it. What is that? I asked. We've been concerned, he said, for a long time, about your mental and emotional stability. I need you to understand what it feels like to hear those words when you are lying flat on your back with a drain coming out of your abdomen and an IV in your arm, wearing a hospital gown, 24 hours removed from emergency surgery. I need you to understand that there is no version of yourself in that position that feels anything other than very, very small. What? I said. We consulted with someone, my mother said. A professional, a therapist who reviewed your history, your patterns of behavior, pulling away from family, the estrangement, some things your aunt shared with her. And she prepared a document. She nodded toward the paper on my bed. It's not an official diagnosis, but it's a professional opinion that there are concerns. You had someone write a document about my mental health, someone who has never met me. She reviewed records, my father said. What records? I never gave anyone permission. We are your parents, my mother said, and her voice was still calm, still that measured tone she uses when she believes she is being reasonable. We have always had access to information about your well-being, and we are worried about you. We are worried about the choices you've been making. I had my appendix out, I said. I didn't have a breakdown. This isn't about the appendix. My father uncrossed his legs and leaned forward. We spoke to an attorney. With your current medical situation, with this document, and with our concerns about your living environment, my living environment, we believe we have grounds to petition for a temporary conservatorship, to ensure you're making sound decisions while you recover. I stared at him. A conservatorship. My father was sitting in a chair by the window in my hospital room, 24 hours after I'd had emergency surgery, telling me he had grounds to petition for a conservatorship over me. I was 29 years old. I had a job. I had a husband. I had a mortgage and a car payment and a therapist and a drawer full of vitamins and a very normal, functional life. You need to leave, I said. We're not going to do that, my mother said gently. We love you. We're here because we love you. The document, my father said, has been reviewed by. I need you to stop talking, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Something had happened in my chest, a kind of cold clarity that sits right below panic. I need you to take that paper and I need you to leave this room. We're not going to. I reached for the nurse call button. My mother's expression shifted. There's no need to, I pressed it. You're being dramatic, my father said. We're trying to. I pressed the call button. Someone is coming. I need you to leave. We just want to talk. I pressed it again and said loudly, clearly in the direction of the door, I need someone in here, please. I need help. The nurse came in under 2 minutes. Her name was on the board behind me. I couldn't see it from where I was lying, but I would learn it later. She was maybe 35, short, with a no-nonsense energy that I have never in my life been so grateful for. She looked at me, then at my parents, then back at me. What's going on? She asked me. Just me. She directed it entirely at me. These are my parents, I said. I did not invite them here. I've asked them to leave and they won't. We're her family, my mother started, and we have a legal document. The nurse held up one hand. Just one hand, flat, and my mother stopped talking. Ma'am, she said, this is our patient's room. She is the decision-maker for her own care and her own visitors. If she's asking you to leave, you need to leave. We have documentation. You can take that up with patient services, the nurse said. Right now, she's asked you to leave. I'm going to need you to respect that. My father stood up slowly. He had a way of standing that was meant to communicate that he was the most important person in any room. It had worked on me my entire life. It did not work on this nurse. "We'll be speaking with hospital administration," he said. "That's absolutely your right," she said, and her voice was cheerful in a way that was somehow devastating. "The patient services office is on the second floor. I'll walk you to the elevator." She walked them to the elevator. She actually did it. When she came back, she came in and closed the door behind her and looked at me for a moment. "Are you okay?" I was crying by then. I hadn't noticed when I started. "They had a document," I said. "Some therapist, I've never met her. They had her write something about my mental health." She nodded slowly. "I heard." She came over and checked my IV and my drain without making a big production of it. "I'm going to make a note in your chart. Unauthorized visitors, patient requested removal, and I'm going to flag this for the charge nurse and for our patient advocate." "What does that mean?" "It means if they try to come back, we'll know about it. And it means there's a record." She paused. "Is your husband here?" "He's on rounds. He works here." Something moved across her face. "What's his name?" I told her. She looked at me for just a second and then she said, "Okay, I'll be right back." She was gone for maybe 4 minutes. I lay there. I looked at the ceiling. The piece of paper my father had set on my bed was still there. I picked it up and looked at it. It was on letterhead from a practice I'd never heard of. The name at the bottom, the therapist who had apparently reviewed my history and determined I had concerning patterns, was someone I had never seen or spoken to in my life. My name at the top was spelled wrong, 1 letter off, an A where an E should be. I almost laughed. The door opened and Garrett came in. He was still in his white coat, stethoscope around his neck, and he had that look on his face that he gets when something has shifted in him from calm to very, very focused. "Tell me what happened," he said. I told him. He listened without interrupting, which is something I love about him. He lets you finish. When I was done, he picked up the paper my father had left and read it. His jaw moved once. He set it back down. "That therapist isn't licensed in this state," he said. I stared at him. "What?" "I looked her up while I was walking here. The practice name on that letterhead, I've never heard of it and I know most of the practices we refer out to. So I checked. She's licensed in Georgia." "We're not in Georgia." He paused. "Also, her license has a disciplinary note from 2021. I didn't say anything. "And your name is spelled wrong," he said. I noticed that. He sat down on the edge of my bed and took my hand. For a minute, neither of us said anything. "I talked to the charge nurse," he said, "and I talked to the patient advocate. Your parents are currently in the patient services office downstairs." A pause. "I also called our attorney." "We have an attorney?" "We do now." Something in his voice was very calm in a way that meant he was not calm. "She's going to start looking into how a therapist in another state got access to anything about your history, because that would require records requests, and records requests require authorization, and if someone forged that authorization, that's not a small problem." I thought about my aunt, the one who had called my parents. I thought about what information she might have had access to and who she might have shared it with, and how long this had actually been in the works. "How long do you think they were planning this?" I asked. Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. But I think today wasn't an accident. I think they knew about the surgery quickly and they moved fast." He looked at me. "I think they thought you'd be alone and scared and they'd have a document and they'd have a plan, and you just go along with it." That was probably right. That was probably exactly right. The patient advocate came up about an hour later. Her name was on her badge, and she shook my hand, and she had the kind of efficient warmth that I associate with people who have seen a lot and stayed good anyway. She sat down and she went through everything with me. She explained what had been documented. She explained my rights clearly and without condescension, that I was an adult, that I had full legal decision-making capacity, that no document from an out-of-state therapist who had never evaluated me in person constituted any kind of legal basis for anything, and that my parents had been informed of all of this, They mentioned an attorney, I said. They're welcome to contact one, she said. But I want to be clear, what they described to patient services downstairs doesn't have a legal pathway. An informal letter from a professional who has never assessed you doesn't meet the bar for any kind of competency proceeding. That requires a formal evaluation, a court process, and your husband would have prior claim to any healthcare decision-making before your parents would even be considered. I thought about that top comment, the one I would eventually read months later, from someone who said the AI writing these stories clearly didn't know the law. I thought about how my situation was the real version, messier and scarier, but also, ultimately, clearer, because the law was actually on my side. It had been on my side the whole time. My parents did not come back to my floor. I was told later, by Garrett, by the patient advocate, pieced together, that after meeting with patient services, they left the building. My father made one more call, this one to Garrett's department chief, framing it as concern for a colleague's wife and the stress Garrett was under. The department chief, who had known Garrett for 4 years and respected him, called Garrett afterward to give him a heads up. That was the last action my parents took that day. Our attorney sent a letter to my parents' home that week. It outlined the situation clearly. The document they had presented was prepared by an out-of-state, disciplined therapist who had no legitimate basis for a professional opinion about me. Accessing my medical or personal history without authorization potentially violated federal privacy law. Any further attempts to use legal instruments based on fabricated professional assessments would be treated as harassment. She also sent a letter to the therapist. I don't know what the therapist said in response. I know that she did not pursue anything further. I stayed in the hospital for 3 more days. Garrett came in between shifts and brought me decent food from the cafeteria, which is apparently not an oxymoron when you know the right people, and we watched bad television and I slept a lot. The nurses on my floor were kind to me with a specific kind of kindness that I think only medical workers understand, the kind that doesn't make a big deal out of things, but is quietly, steadily present. On my second night there, the nurse who had walked my parents to the elevator came in to check on me during her evening rounds. I asked her name. She told me. I just want to say thank you, I said. You didn't have to walk them out yourself. You could have just called security. She looked at me for a second. I wanted to make sure they actually went. That was it. That was all she said. I've thought about that a lot since then. I've thought about how the people who help you in the worst moments of your life are often not the people you expected. They're not always the ones with the biggest role in your story. Sometimes it's someone who has known you for 40 minutes, who has no obligation to you beyond professional duty, who looks at a situation and makes a judgment call to be on your side. My parents have not contacted me since the attorney's letter. It's been 8 months. My father Parse says the silence might not be permanent, that people like my parents often cycle back around when they've recalibrated, when they've found a new angle, when they've convinced themselves the last attempt didn't count. I'm prepared for that. I have documentation. I have an attorney who knows the history. I have a husband who looks up out-of-state license statuses while walking down hospital hallways. What I didn't expect, what I'm still sitting with, is the grief of it. Because I know that sounds strange, they came into my hospital room with a legal document and tried to take my autonomy while I was recovering from surgery, and I won, and there is grief in it. Because somewhere in me there is still a version of a daughter who wanted something different from them, who wanted parents who showed up at a wedding instead of staying home, who wanted a mother who came to the hospital and sat beside the bed and held her hand and didn't bring a folder. That's not self-pity, it's just true. I went home on a Tuesday. The drive home was 40 minutes and Garrett played the playlist I'd made for our anniversary road trip last year, and at some point he reached over and put his hand on mine and kept it there for the rest of the drive. When Mike got him a luxury apartment in New York. When I graduated, got him a luxury apartment in New York. Mike me cookies every Christmas, was standing on her porch. And when she saw us pull up she called out, "There she is," like I had won something. Maybe I had. The piece of paper is in a manila folder in our file cabinet. Our attorney said to keep it. I don't look at it. I know it's there. Knowing it's there is enough. If you're reading this and you recognize something in it, the controlled childhood, The love that comes with conditions attached, the parents who show up at your worst moments not to support you but to leverage the situation. I just want to say, it's not in your head. The thing you've been trying to name is real, and there are people who will believe you. Not everyone. Not always quickly, but they're there. Sometimes they're the nurse who walks your parents to the elevator because she wants to make sure they actually go. Sometimes that's what protection looks like. Quiet and efficient and absolutely certain of itself. And sometimes that's enough. I've been thinking a lot lately about the word control, and how long it took me to understand what it actually meant in the context of my own family. It didn't look like cruelty from the outside. It never does. It looked like involvement, like concern, like parents who cared too much rather than too little. And for a long time I accepted that framing, because I didn't have another one. When the people who raise you tell you that their way of loving you is the right way, you spend years trying to make yourself fit inside it, before it even occurs to you to ask whether the shape was ever yours to begin with. What happened in that hospital room? My father setting that paper on my bed, my mother's measured voice, the folder they'd clearly prepared before they even walked in, was not a spontaneous act. That's the part I keep coming back to. They planned it. They waited for the moment when I would be most physically vulnerable, most alone, most likely to feel small, and then they moved. That tells you something about the nature of that kind of control. It doesn't disappear when you grow up and move out and build a life. It just waits. It looks for the gap. What they didn't plan for, was Garrett. Not because he swooped in and fixed everything, but because the life I had built with him meant I wasn't actually alone, even when I was in that room by myself. The attorney existed because of choices we'd made together after the wedding, choices about protecting ourselves that I hadn't even fully understood at the time. The nurse acted the way she did because she was good at her job and because I was clear in the moment. And I was clear because 2 years of therapy had given me the language to be. None of it was luck. All of it was the result of small, deliberate decisions made long before that morning. That's the thing about integrity. About actually doing the work of becoming someone who knows their own mind. It doesn't show up dramatically in ordinary moments. You just make the appointment. You go to the session. You sit with the uncomfortable thing until it's less uncomfortable. And then one day, you're lying in a hospital bed with a drain in your side and someone hands you a document with your name spelled wrong, and instead of freezing, instead of apologizing, instead of trying to manage their feelings, you reach for the call button, and your hand is steady. I think about the nurse a lot. She didn't know my history, she didn't know about the wedding they skipped or the years of silence, or the folder my father had clearly had prepared. She just walked in, read the room, and made a choice. That's what I mean when I talk about the kind of person worth becoming, not someone with power or status, but someone who, when the moment comes, knows exactly what the right thing is and does it without hesitation. My parents' plan fell apart, not because the universe punished them, but because every piece of it was built on a false assumption that I was still the version of me who would go along with it. I'm not that person anymore. I did too much work to get here, and the life I built, slowly, imperfectly, with a lot of help, turned out to be exactly strong enough to hold.